We come out on some flinty ground, where it was all juniper, and we just went on. No attempt to top it, their trackers at fault. We rode all that day. We saw no more of the savages, for they were come under the lee of the mountain, and were somewhere on the slopes below us. As soon as it was dusk and the bats was about to judge, he altered our course again, ridden along holding on Toha's hat, looking up at the little animals. We got broke up and scattered all in the junipers, and we halted to regroup and to recruit the horses. We sat around in the dark. No one spoke a word. When the judge got back, he and Glanton whispered among themselves, and then we moved on. We led the horses in the dark. There was no trail, just steep, scrabbly rock. When we reached Thokuf, some of the men thought that he meant for us to hide there, and that he was for a fact daft altogether. But it was the nighter. The nighter, you see. We left all that we owned at the mouth of that cave, and we filled our wallets and panniers and our mosilas with the cave dirt, and we left out at daybreak. When we topped the rise above that place and looked back, there was a great spout of bats being sucked down into the cave. Thousands of the creatures, and they continued so for an hour or more, and even then it was just that we could no longer see them, the judge. We left him at a high pass, a little Clearwater Creek, him and one of the Delawares. He told us to circle the mountain and to return to that place in 48 hours. We unloaded all the containers onto the ground and took the 2 horses with us and him, and the Delaware commenced lugging the panniers and the wallets up that little creek. I watched him go, and I said that I would never set eyes on that man again. Tobin looked at the kid. Never in this world. I thought Glanton would leave him. We went on. The next day, on the far side of the mountain, we encountered the 2 lads that had deserted us, Hangin, upside down in a tree. They'd been skinned, and I can tell thee it does very little for a man's appearance. But if the savages had not guessed it already, now they knew for sure that would known of us any powder, we would not ride the animals. Just lead them, keep them off the rocks. Hold their noses if they sniffled. But in those 2 days, the judge leached out the guano with creek water and wood ash and precipitated it out, and he built a clay kiln and burned charcoal in it, doused the fire by dawn, fired it again come dark. When we found him and the Delaware was settin' in the creek stark, naked, and they appeared at first to be drunk, but on what none could surmise. The entire top of that mountain was covered with Apache Indians, and their settee. He got up when he seen us and went to the willows, and come back with a pair of wallets, and in one was about 8 pounds of pure crystal saltpeter, and in the other about 3 pounds of fine alder charcoal. He'd ground the charcoal to a powder in the hollow of a rock. You could have made ink of it. Hellish the bags shut and put them across the pommel of Glanton's saddle, and him and Thindian got their clothes, and I was glad of it, for I never seen a grown man with not a hair to his body, and him weighing 24 stone, which he did then, and does now, and by my own warrant, for I added up the counters on the bar with my own and sober eyes, at a stock scale in Chihuahua City, in that same month and year. We went down the mountain with no scouts, nothing, just straight out. We were dead, for sleep. It was dark when we reached the plain, and we grouped and took a head count, and then we rode out. The moon was about 3/4 full and waxing, and we were like circus riders, not a sound, the horses on eggshells. We'd no way of knowing where the savages was. The last clue had of their vicinity was the poor buggers flayed in the tree. We set out dead west Acris Desert. Doc Irving was before me, and it was that bright I could count the hairs on his head. We rode all night, and toward the morning, just as the moon was down, we come upon a band of... They scattered and come back. not a sound out of them, no more than smoke. They drift off and quarter around and circle the horses, bold as brass. We cut at them with our hobbles, and they would slip past. You couldn't hear them on the hard pan, just their breath, or they would mutter and grouse, or pop their teeth. Glanton halted, and the thing swirled around and slank off, and come back. Two of the Delawares backtracked off to the left, a bit braver souls than me, and sure they found the kill. 'Twas a young buck antelope new, killed the evening before. It was about half consumed, and we set upon it with our knives and took the rest of the meat with us, and we ate it raw in the saddle, and it was the first meat we'd seen in 6 days. Froze. For it, we were. Foraging on the mountain for pinyon nuts, like bears, and glad to get them. We left little more than bones for the lobos, but I would never shoot a wolf, and I know other men of fearsome sentiments. In all this time the judge had spoke hardly a word. So at dawn we were on the edge of a vast Malpay, and his honor takes up a position on some lava rocks there, and he commences to give USA address. It was like a sermon, but it was no such sermon as any man of us had ever heard before. Beyond the Malpais was a volcanic peak, and in the sunrise it was many colors, and there were dark little birds crossing down the wind, and the wind was flapping. The judge's old Benjamin about him, and he pointed to that stark and solitary mountain, and delivered himself of an oration to what end I know not, then or now, and he concluded with the telling us that our mother Theath, as he said, was round like an egg and contained all good things within her. Then he turned and led the horse he had been ridden across that terrain of black and glassy slag, treacherous tollman and beast alike, and us behind him like the disciples of a new faith. The ex-priest broke off and tapped the dead pipe against the heel of his boot. He looked at the judge over the way where he sat with his torso bared to the flames as was his practice. Had earned and regarded the kid, the Malpais. It was a maze. You'd run out upon a little promontory and you'd be balked about by its steep crevasses. You wouldn't dare to jump them. Sharp black glass, the edges, and sharp theflinty rocks below. We led the horses with every care, and still they were bleeding about their hoofs. Our boots was cut to pieces, clambering over those old caved and rimpled plates. You could see well enough how things had gone in that place. Rocks melted and set up all wrinkled like a pudding. The earth stove through to the molten core of her. Wherefore aught any man lies the locality of hell. For the earth is a globe in the void, and truth there's no up nor down to it, and there's men in this company. Besides myself, seen little cloven hoofprints, and thus tone clever as a little doe in her going, but what little doe ever trod melted rock? I'd not go behand scripture, but it may be that there has been sinners, so notorious evil that the fires coughed them up again, and I could well see in the long ago how it was little devils with their pitchfork shad traversed that fiery vomit for two, salvaged back those souls that had by misadventure been spewed up from their damnation onto the outer shelves of the world. Aye, it's a notion, no more, but someplace in the scheme of things this world must touch the other. And something put them little hooflet markings in the lava flow, for I seen them there myself. The judge, he seemed not to take his eyes from that dead cone, where it rose off the desert like agate shanker. We followed solemn as owls, so that he turned to look back, and he did laugh when he seen our faces. At the foot of the mountain we drew lots, and we sent 2 men to goon with the horses. I watched them go. One of them is at this fire tonight, and I saw him lead them horses away over the slaglands like a doomed man. And we were not doomed ourselves, one don't reckon. When I looked up he was already upon Theslope hand and foot. The judge was his bag over his shoulder and his rifle for Alpens, and sod it we all go. Not halfway up, we could already see the savages out on the plain. We climbed in. I thought at worst we'd throw ourselves into the cauldron rather than be taken by fiends. We climbed up, and I reckon it was midday when we reached the top. We were done in. The savages, not 10 miles out. I looked at the men about me, and sure, they didn't look much. The dignity was gone out of them. They were good hearts all, then and now, and I did not like to see them. So, and I thought the judge had been sent among us for a curse, and yet, he proved Meridian at the time he did. I'm of two minds again now. He was the first to the rim of the cone for all the size of him, and he stood gazing about like he'd come for the view. Then he sat down, and he begun to scale at the rock with his knife. One by one we straggled up, and he sat with his back to that gaping hole, and he was chipping away and heckled upon us to do the same. It was brimstone, a wheel of brimstone all about the rim of the cauldron, bright yellow and shining here and there, with the little flakes of silica, but most pure flowers of sulfur. We chipped it loose and chopped it fine with our knives till we had about 2 pounds of it. And then the judge took the wallets and went to a cupped place in the rock, and dumped out the charcoal and the niter, and stirred them about with his hand, and poured the sulfur in. I didn't know but what we'd be required to bleed into it like Freemasons, but it was not so. He worked it up dry with his hands, and all the while the savages down there on the plain, drawing it to us, and when I turned back, the judge was standing, the great hairless oaf, and he'd took out his pizzle, and he was pissing into the mixture, with a great vengeance, and one hand aloft, and he cried out for us to do likewise.